and welcome to Card Game Wednesday, the day of the week where we enjoy all things card game related. And I know I am falling very far behind in my discussion videos on the recent spoilers that have been happening. I am planning on trying to catch up with them. Hopefully by the end of this week I'll be all caught up, so there may be a sudden influx of spoiler videos and whatnot, guys, for me to try and catch up with everything that's been going on. So my apologies that those are running a little bit late. Things have been pretty hectic, what with Capital Sci-Fi Con happening last weekend and everything, and me getting ready and just sorting out the house and everything like that. So that's why those videos have been delayed. But your actual feature video for today, for Card Game Wednesday, is something of a bit of a, what can I call it, a bit of a laughter deck, a bit of a meme one, not one to take very seriously, as you've seen by the title of this deck that I'm calling it Splish, Splash, Take a Bath. This is definitely not a serious deck at all. It is not competitive in any way, shape or form. I just built this deck because I thought, hey, you know what, a couple of these janky combos or janky things that happen can be a little bit funny, so I might as well just stick them in the one deck. And also this is kind of like a reiteration or a kind of a redo of an old deck that I built way back ago. You might remember it, guys. It was a light blue Flute deck. I've actually changed it up a little bit and included a couple of new things as well, and basically decided, hey, you know what, this deck can run just as well with a different ruler as well. So that's why I decided to use it with two rulers in mind that you can easily just swap out depending on the situation. Obviously, the two rulers that I've got in mind for it here are Flute and Lumia. Now, I don't have a preference over which one runs the deck. Either way, some cards you will take out depending on which ruler you decide to go with. For example, if I choose Flute to be the ruler, then I will slip in the water dragons. The way I've built it is that Lumia is the primary ruler, and then when we side deck out into Flute, we basically side out a couple of cards, whatever, to stick in the water dragons, and that's basically it. And also depending on what we're playing against with our opponent here. So Lumia is technically the main ruler for this deck, but sides into Flute at the same time. So basically, either one of them works out pretty well. I feel like I get the best results when I use the Lumia over the Flute. Flute obviously is a bit situational if you feel like you desperately need more card draw. But I feel like using Lumia at the same time is just as effective. Not many of the things that we have in the deck are specifically great for, say, flickering. So not a lot of stuff has enter abilities, you know, with that trigger when she flickers stuff, whatever. Her flickering effect is mainly for, you know, getting stuff to stand again at the end of the turn and whatnot. So we have a blocker and everything. And the main reason I called this Splish Splash Take a Bath is because it's a water deck, but also because I am fed up of having to refer to Lumia's effect as Flicker. So instead of that, we're going to call it Splish Splashing. So we're going to splash in our Resonators from the field and whatnot. You know, try and make it a little thematic, but I mainly do my best not to flip these rulers if I can so help it. Mainly because the way I've built this deck is that we cannot flip Lumia, because my build is just a basic blue light. There are no sources of fire. So the only way we would ever be able to do a judgment is if we keep energized for fire. Half the time I don't, because I don't like her ability when she flips. And also because we don't run Nyarlathotep in this deck, so basically we don't get her other ability by discarding her or removing her from the game and whatnot. So the only reason we would ever flip Lumia is if we had the fire energized still attached to her, and if we desperately needed some kind of blocker or 1000 with swiftness. Same with Flute. If we have Flute, we rarely ever flip, because I feel like while her J-Ruler side has very pretty art, she is best utilized on this side where she can draw a card when she taps, and I feel like that's her best use. Flipping her over for sealed abilities and all that stuff, I feel like is just not very good and everything like that, so that's why I feel like either or, these two rulers could suit this deck rather well. So now we'll go into Resonators and Chance and all that malarkey and all that jazz. So going into it, guys, and pardon me if there's some debris there attached to my cards. Going up first, we have the 4 of the tiny Alabaster Drake, who I like to call Baby Wyber. It's just to the point where we just call him Baby Wyber at my locals now. We don't even call him Tiny Alabaster Drake. He is just Baby Wyber. He is a 1-drop Resonator, 100/300, a dragon with flying. And whenever this card attacks, you force roll for 1, so you roll a dice, and it gains X amount of attack, that is the X, which is the result of the roll, until end of turn. I mainly run 4 of these just because I quite like him as a little nippy attacker that you can play turn 1, turn 2 you'll be able to attack in the air if he lives turn 1, obviously. Potentially you can get up to 700 attack if you've managed to roll a 6. Other than that, I just feel like he's a decent 1-drop for light, and This is the iteration where I believe I have done it for Flute being the ruler, which is why the water dragons are in the deck as well, running 4 of them. But these can easily be sided out for some other cards that I have in side deck or whatever, just depending on the situation. I feel like I need to build the side deck a bit more because there's not really many cards I have in the side deck currently. I could add some additional ones and whatnot, but really, they're only here for when you choose to have Flute as the ruler. These can easily be sided out when you decide to pick Lumia instead. Obviously, it's a 1-drop blue. It's 100, 400. It's another dragon, coincidentally enough. You may rest this recovered card to call a magic stone rather than rest your J ruler. If you break the seal of 5, it gains 400, 400 and flying until for the rest of the game, as long as you have the 5 or more stones. Next up, we have 2 copies here of the Ivy on the Floating Isle. Again, this is actually a card that I really liked after the advent of the Demon King pre-release, so I really wanted to try and squeeze this in because it is a fun way to troll your opponent. It's a 2 cost, it's 1 light and 1 void, a 0/1000, it's vegetation obviously because it's a bunch of ivy. The card can block J/Resonators with flying, which is the important part, but also the really good part here is that whenever this card blocks a J/Resonator, that J/Resonator doesn't recover during its controller's next recovery phase, which I really like. It's a good way to kind of stall out your opponent. Say if they're like a rush deck or something like that, or they're just kind of like swarming, this is a good way to kind of stop their bigger Resonators from causing you too much trouble, especially since 1000 defense early game doesn't get destroyed very easily, but it just depends on what kind of like cards they end up pulling, or rather drawing rather. But I feel like it's a good way to kind of stall for a little bit of time. Next up, one of the probably the best light blue cards, or rather Resonators in the game. We have the Will O The Wisp, a 100/100 Resonator, 1 blue and 1 light. It is a spirit, of course, and it has barrier, which is very, very good. When it enters the field, you draw a card, so that is also good for the splish splashy effect with Lumia, getting it in and out of the field, and then getting another card. And whenever this card is dealt damage, you gain them much life, which is very, very nice, especially in those instances where maybe you're going up against, say, a burn deck or something that is decreasing your life rather rapidly. It's very nice to be able to maybe block a very powerful Resonator and gain that life. Funnily enough though, and I might make this into another video for the fun Force of Will interactions, is that if, to break it down rather, if this card goes up against Jeanne d'Arc, you don't gain life, because obviously it gains minus counters, which is technically not damage, so you wouldn't gain any life in that instance, which I find rather amusing. So we run 3 of these. Next up, we have 2 copies here of Faria, the Paladin of the Dawn. Only 2, because I only own 2 copies. I only managed to get 1 box of Wingolf 3. It is a light Resonator, 600, 600. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to this card while it's battling, which I really, really like. It's a good way to chip away some damage at our opponent without having to worry about Faria too much getting killed. And you can pay 2 light to cancel target spell or ability targeting this card. I very rarely use this ability, mainly because I'm not too fussed whether Faria dies, because she is only a 2-drop. She's not really the most important aspect of this deck, but she is good for just being a kind of Resonator that goes in there, does some damage, and doesn't exactly die straight away, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Next up, we have 2 copies here of Amaterasu, the Guide of Light. I'll be very sad when this card goes when Lapis Cluster rotates out, because I love this card so much. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous card here. It's a 3-drop, it is 2 light and 1 void, an 800, 800 myth. It's kind of hard to read the text here, but I will do my best because this is a full art, obviously. Whenever this card deals damage, you gain that much life. You can pay 2 light and rest 2 recovered Resonators you control to put this card from your graveyard into the field rested. You can only place this ability only with the card in your graveyard. Or you can use it for inheritance, which is basically you pay the cost of the card, which is 2 light and 1 void. And you can give a target J/Resonator 800, 800 until end of turn. Most of the time, I prefer to try and play her onto the field because her life gain ability is very useful. But at the same time, if I feel like maybe I'm not going to get that much worth off of her, then I will happily just inheritance her to a specific card that is actually quite fun to use. Next up, I have 1 copy here of another Jeanne d'Arc. This one is the Maid of, I think it's Orleans or Orleans. It's a 3-drop. It's 1 water, 1 light, and 1 void. It's in 600, 600. So not as good as say Amaterasu, who for essentially the almost in 3 cost whatever is a bit stronger. But I find it's kind of useful in this deck. For when she enters the field, you gain 600 life, which is immediate life gain, which is really, really nice. And whenever this card is put into a graveyard from your field, you draw a card. I only have 1 in this deck, so this is the version of the deck which is intended to be Flute orientated, or Flute orientated, if I could even say the word properly. But if you're siding out into the Lumia, I would side out the dragons and stick another one of this in just to kind of boost up the numbers of your Resonators a little bit. But other than that, I would only really run her at 2. I feel like because she's so expensive for her attack and defense and whatnot, not worth running any more copies of her. But she is still a pretty cool Resonator. We have 2 copies here of a Charlotte, Wielder of the Sacred Spirit. Again, I would mainly keep this in the build that is focusing on Flute as the ruler as opposed to Lumia. I feel like she doesn't get a lot of traction with Lumia as the ruler, obviously, because you have to watch what you're playing and you maybe don't want to be flickering her in and out constantly unless you really wanted to get that enter the field draw card on her. But otherwise, she's a 4 cost Resonator. She's 3 water and 1 void. She starts off as 0/0, but she has barrier, which is the total cost 2 or equal than numbers in the number of cards in your hand, and she gains 2/2 for each card in your hand. So again, she is ideal for the Flute build where you're wanting to draw a lot of cards and basically have a full hand the majority of the time if you can, running her at 2. But this is the main kind of, well, not the main, but he is one of the main meme kind of characters, which is why I built this deck. So the Misty Dragon here, or the Misty Dragon Spirit, is a pretty funny card. He's funny for Ayu, obviously, he's one of the best cards for the Ayu deck to run, but he's actually quite funny when you use him for other means. So he's a 4 cost Resonator with 2 water and 2 void, a 900 flying. He has this ability here where it's 0. You remove this card from the game at the next end of turn, put it into the field under its owner's control, which is the main reason why I feel like a lot of people like this for the meme reasons, because obviously you can flicker it out and whatnot to prevent it from being targeted by stuff and everything like that. It manages to work around a lot of spells that would say target a Resonator, say instantly destroy it, remove it from the game, blah 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 blah. He also has another ability here, but that only works if we have Ayu, and we're not using Ayu obviously. And then this one doesn't really affect us either, because this is mainly used for the Ayu ability either, so we basically ignore this half of the card and just focus on the top one here. But the main reason, I'm also running 3 of him by the way, the main reason why I find him to be funny is because he's a 4 cost Resonator, right? He's 9/9 and he flies. So the majority of the time, he's going to be a decent play on your turn 4. He's awesome. The main stuff happens when, say, you're getting to your turn 5 and you have, say, your 5 stones up, or maybe even turn 6, depending on when you want to pull this off. One of the funny combos I like to do with this dragon, if I manage to pull it off, is I run Dawn of the Earth in this deck, which obviously you can recover a Resonator and whatnot. So what I would like to do is, if I have enough will for this, by the way, because you need to be sure you have enough will, is say Inheritance Amaterasu onto Misty Dragon. Say you're going to attack, your opponent has no blocks or anything like that, so you Inheritance Amaterasu onto the dragon. Give it 8/8. Can't be cancelled because it's an inheritance ability. Technically, it can't be cancelled, I believe, because there's like no cards that say cancel an inheritance ability. They never printed that back in, was it Legacy Lost, I believe? Yeah, Legacy Lost, which is probably one of the best reasons why inheritance abilities always catch people off guard. But as I was saying, you would inheritance it onto the Misty Dragon, give it 8/8, so it's what, a 17/17? It already attacks, use Dawn of the Earth, recover the Misty Dragon, and attack again, which I think is quite a decent play. If you manage to pull that off, and your opponent can't stop it, you can easily just kill your opponent, like, because 17/17, you would easily, actually, no, you wouldn't, because it would be 30, it would be, I cannot do math at all. It would be 40, well, maybe you could, depends on what their life state is and whether they've had life gain or not. But that's one of the main things that I like to do with this deck, is that this is like the memeiest play that you can do, is Inheritance Amaterasu onto the Misty Dragon, Dawn of the Earth. I also have Spinning Aquasol to make sure that Dawn of the Earth is one of the ones that will always stay in my hand, because it is such a useful card. Or if not, we could also use other things like Optional Possession in order to give him just a simple 2/2 if we don't have Amaterasu in hand. There's other cards that we can have to boost up his attack and whatnot, but it is pretty funny to see that happen and see your opponent will not be prepared for it. So that's why I run 3 of him. He's like my meme dragon. He is more of a meme dragon than the Baby Gwyber or the Flute's Water Dragon. And finally, we have the big beefy Resonator for this deck. We have, I've also got a full art here, so I'll put the full art at the front here. We have Almerius, the Summoner of Spirits. When this first came out, I really didn't like this card. I was like, I do not like this card at all. What is going on with these spirits? But actually, I've kind of warmed up to this card a little bit. Not too heavily, though, but I feel like it's not as bad a card as it was. Now that I've gone up against decks who utilize this in Lumia, and for severe life gain, I'm just like, okay, I half love you and I half hate this card. So what she is that she's a 5 cost. She's 2 light, 1 water, and 2 void, which is a weird breaking up of the will, but I digress. She's a 1000, 6 sages. She has flying. When this card enters your field, you force for 1, where you roll a die, put up to 3 spirit resonators whose combined total cost is X or less from your graveyard into your field, where X is the result of the roll, and whenever a spirit enters your field, you gain 400 life. Since Will O Wisp is the only resonator that we have who is a spirit, we can technically only pick her if she is in our graveyard, and since she is a 2 cost, we would need to roll at least a 6 in order to get the 3 of them out of the graveyard into the field. Otherwise, we would have to hope for at least 2 or 4 from our rolls. But that is still, even if we manage to get 2 Will O Wisp, that is 800 life gain. And obviously when they enter the field, they draw us cards as well, which is very happy. And then whenever we have Lumia as our ruler, obviously we Splish, Splash, Amaterasu get more chances to roll the dice if we have spirits that are in our graveyard and whatnot. And that's really the kind of trying and be a big finisher if the meme dragon doesn't pull it off for us. But I'm not very often, rephrase that, I don't get this combo off very often with this deck. I get the dragon combo off more than I do with the Amaterasu one. I feel like I don't draw Amaterasu enough. Maybe it's because I only have 2 of these in here. But even when I have Flute and I'm drawing like mad, I very rarely ever pull, or rather draw Amaterasu, which might have something to do with me only running 2 of them or whatnot. But I very rarely pull this one off. I pull the dragon one off more than I do this one. But I still think it's quite funny if it can happen. Now, going on to our chants and whatnot, because these ones are kind of I feel like they support the kind of jokey side, or the rather meme side of the deck and whatnot. So, first up, we have Amaterasu's Foresight, and I managed to get one of the promo ones from one of our past tournaments here, which I was pretty happy about, because I love this promo. It's absolutely gorgeous. It is a 2-cost chant. It is quick cast also. It is 1 light and 1 void. And basically, prevent all damage that would be dealt by J/Resonators this turn. Affects J rulers as well, which is the vital importance one. This is the one that basically can shut down Ayu if Ayu is not careful about what stuff they've discarded and whatnot, or what they've used, whatever, when they flip and everything. This can be the bane of some people's lives. This simple quick cast card. Running 2 of these. Obviously, I mentioned there before, Dawn of the Earth. I have 3 copies of it, which is ridiculous, because I figured I didn't have enough copies of this because it's an SR, and then the SR chants are really hard to get, but turns out I had 3 of them, which is pretty alright. It is a not a 1 drop, it is 1 blue and a 1 light, so it's a 2 drop here. It's got a big wall of text here, half of which isn't really applicable to us. It's also quick cast, but I will go through the wall of text here. You choose 1. This turn, if a Resonator would be put into your opponent's field without being played, remove it from the game. Instead, you draw a card. Or, recover target Resonator you control. It gains 200 and barrier until end of turn. You draw a card. Or, remove all non-Magic Stone, non-J/ruler cards your opponent controls with total cost 0 from the game. Draw a card. So the latter half is really mainly for, say, token decks, elf decks, and etc. It's mainly the middle one that I like, the one where you can recover Resonator, give it 200, and barrier. This is the combo that we like to use for the meme dragon. I very rarely use the first one, I believe. That doesn't happen very often, but I like to use this in circumstances, depending on if we can recover, say, our big dragon. Running 3 of these, but also because we also have 4 copies of Spinning Aquasol to ensure that we have Dawn of the Earth in our hand 9 times out of 10, but we can also grab other useful cards as well. We can also grab Amaterasu's Foresight, obviously, which means that we can force our opponent to, have, no damage whatsoever. It's a 1-cost quick cast, so you can basically put target chant from your graveyard into your hand. I also have 1 full art of this, which is actually really nice, but this is mainly the one where it's hey, I'm going to go grab that chant again, the one that was really annoying, okay, thanks. And, basically, hey, I'm going to grab Dawn of Earth, I'm going to grab Amaterasu's Foresight. Just remember that I've grabbed that card and it's sitting in my hand now. So we're running 4 of those for that kind of trolley effect here. We have 3 copies of Optional Possession, which I really like. At first, I didn't really like it because it was just hey, it's only 2/2, but actually, when you realize it's got Remnant, it's actually a lot better than you think. It's a 1-cost quick cast, obviously, with quick cast and Remnant. You choose either Flying, Precision, or First Strike, and target J/Resonators gains 200, and the chosen ability until end of turn. If we're using this for the dragon, I mainly use it for either First Strike or Precision, because it's already got Flying, so we don't need to give it Flying twice. Normally, it doesn't matter if our opponent isn't choosing to block, so we don't really need to matter. But First Strike is pretty nice, just in case we need to make sure that our dragon doesn't take any damage. If they so happen to have a flying blocker, 9 times out of 10, they really don't. But actually, I would pick First Strike probably out of all the keywords here that we have. And the extra 2/2 is very, very nice. And also because it's only a 1-drop. Next up, we have 2 copies here of the Abominable. Oh no, Indomitable Spirit. I thought it was abominable for a minute there. It is a 1-drop light quick cast. I like the cheap quick cast stuff for light and blue. You can see that there's a kind of a theme there going on with this deck. It has quick cast, obviously. Target blocking J/Resonators gains 600 until end of turn. Draw a card. So that's really good for, say, our Will O Wisp, where we know it's going to die, but we want to try and deal some damage to whatever it is that's going to be killing it at the point where we can gain that much life and obviously get that much damage and get another card draw. That's the reason why I'm running 2 of these. And this is obviously in here because this build was built specifically for the Flute version. We have 1 Truth of Time, which is a 1-drop. You draw a card, and if you break the seal of 6 when you play this card, you draw another card. So basically, if you've broken the seal, you draw 2 cards. If not, you draw 1. I only really wanted to include this here because it's a full art and it's very, very pretty. And last but not least, we have 2 copies here of Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic. Pretty standard stuff. 1-drop quick cast remnant. Target J/Resonator. Target Resonator, I should say. Loses all abilities and becomes a 400/400 bear until end of turn. And we're only running 2 copies of this, mainly because it has remnant, and we can get it out with Spinning Aquasol if we really want to. We don't really need to, but we can if we must. And our magic stone base is pretty simple. I'm having to proxy 2 of these stones because, again, these are the counter stones from Fingolf 3. And I never got a second set, so I'm proxying the stones and whatnot. But it doesn't really matter too much. Our locals were pretty lax about proxying stones and whatnot, especially the Fingolf stones that not everyone can get. This is the one that normally produces light, but you can remove the counter and it will produce black. You only get 2 counters on these cards when they enter, rather. Next, we have 4 copies of the Magic Stone of Light Vapors, which is the Jewel Stone that produces light or water. And then finally, we have 1 basic Water Stone and 1 basic Light Stone, just to kind of divvy up. I was going to put in the Stone of the Dragonoids, but at the same time, I was like, really, the Dragonoid Stone doesn't benefit this deck at all because it's to do with dragon counters and all that stuff, so it really wouldn't help this deck at all. And I don't really want to pay 300 life and whatnot, but in terms of the side deck, there's really not much in it because I've only got like 5 cards for the side deck right now. It's not a full side deck, it's just a minimalistic one. Mainly because I wasn't taking this deck very seriously at all, so I didn't really think of a full side deck. But we have another Jeanne here for the kind of 2 set of it. We also have 2 copies of Keys' Call, which is a quick cast 1-drop blue. Cancel target automatic ability of a Resonator and you draw a card. And then this one here is the Sealing the Gates of Darkness, a 1-cost light quick cast chant. Remove target Darkness Resonator from the game. Again, pretty simple stuff. I only really use it if I'm going up against Darkness, and there's some pesky Dark Resonators that I want to get rid of. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this rather not serious deck profile here for this rather silly Splish Splash Take a Bath deck profile featuring some water and some light. Let me know down below, guys, if you want me to try some more kind of funny or kind of meme kind of deck profile ideas. I mainly did this because I'm still trying to perfect my Maiden deck, and I've not really built any other competitive decks since I've been focusing so much on that one. So that's the reason why we had kind of more of a jokey one this week. But I hope you enjoyed it, guys. Let me know your thoughts on some of the different interactions that I talked about here, some of the meme plays that we can use with the Mist Dragon and with like Dawn of the Earth and Amaterasu and everything like that. Until next time, guys.